Harvey Thomas will be taking the stage. Please give him the welcome he deserves as he begins to share some words with us. Harvey Thomas.
Hi, Saltown. Let's give it up for our previous acts. So much ass tonight. Now here's time for your infomercial, commercial break, whatever you want to call it, because I'm going to read a story of mine. This one has never been read before in public or here. I wrote it like 5 years ago, and I wrote it in like a week. It was one of those that poured out of me. Gotta love it when that happens. It's called The Kane Brothers. I'm just going to start reading. Here we go. Chris Kane opened the trunk, and Trent, his sister Jen's low-life, burden to society boyfriend, squirmed in it. His cheeks appeared puffy from the rag's tension around his face, and he spewed semi-audible words from his flapping lips. Chris then observed his brother, Dan, his unkempt greasy hair, and dirt smeared across his forehead as he dug Trent's future resting place. Dan trumped up to Chris and flung the shovel at him. "I'm done digging this ditch." The shovel's handle hit Chris's charger, and the shovel bounced off the tip of his shoe, a cloud of dust hovering over his feet and dusting his pants. Every muscle in Chris's arms urged him to grab the shovel and chop it right down into Dan's head. The image of it embedded into his forehead made him smile. "Something funny?" Dan inquired. No, nothing at all," he replied. "Then wipe that fucking grin off your face." "Please let me go," Trent rumbled from the trunk. All the intended consonants came out as W's, and the vein in his sweat-glistened forehead throbbed as he pleaded. They pulled him out of the trunk and dropped him onto the ground. Chris cut the rope, binding his ankles. He figured he won't run. Trent didn't know where he was, and Chris was damn sure he wasn't breaking a sweat, carrying 190 pounds of unemployed, drug-abusing, thieving trash, even if the distance was 10 feet. Chris took his left arm while Dan took his right, and an echoed howl soared through the trees. Neither of the Kane brothers flinched from the howl, but Trent belted out a smothering whimper. Dan shoved him. "A wolf's howl is the least of your problems right now." Trent took 2 steps and his right ankle bent, causing him to fall to his knees. His shoulders slumped and his head dropped, his chin resting against his sternum. Chris yanked his arm. "Come on. Only 10 more steps to the gates of hell for you, and about 5 more minutes of your life remain, so live it up." They tossed him about 2 feet from the ditch. Trent's head sank and his shoulders bobbed up and down as if his imminent death was some sort of joke. Intermittent moans accompanied his movements, and tears rained from his face and soaked into the dirt below. The eerie howl seeped through the trees again, much louder and much closer, yet none of them acknowledged it. Chris tugged the rag and it fluttered into the ditch. Trent's sobs sharpened like music blaring from a car after the door opened. "I know what this is about," Trent cried. "I got a business opportunity, and I couldn't resist. I needed money fast. It was the quickest money I could find." Chris walked to the other side of the ditch, facing Trent and Dan. Chris saw the opportunity to take out Dan. First Trent, then Dan. Pop, pop! He won't see the bullet coming. Whoops, it was just a slip of the trigger, he rationalized to himself. He told himself that when Charlene, Dan's fiancée, tells him the news that he's dead. He tightened the grip on his 9mm. "My sister worked a full-time job at the bank and waited on tables night after night for that $8,000. That was Katie's, your daughter's, school tuition money. You pumped your daughter's education into your veins." Chris pointed the gun at Trent, and Dan followed suit. The way Trent's lips quivered, the way his dark eyebrows sloped in fear, his whole facial expression. Chris saw his niece. He saw Katie. He lowered his arm, and some tension drained from it. "What are you waiting for, Chris? If you don't do this, I will," Dan yelled. Chris's arm straightened up and aimed right for Trent's head. His thoughts drifted back to a couple months ago at Katie's 7th birthday party. She sat on Trent's lap as he blew out the candles. He hugged her and kissed her on the cheek, and Chris thought they'd have a chance. He cocked back the gun's hammer and whispered, "To think, I was just starting to like you." A white light like a camera flash lit up the forest and a buzzing sound amplified around them. It reminded Chris of a bumblebee zipping by his ear. Dan staggered and he punched his right arm with his left. Dan's right arm from the elbow down disappeared, and Chris saw his severed hand fully gripping his gun on the ground. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it would wipe what he saw and replace it with what was really there, a fallen tree branch or a pile of leaves and dirt. Didn't work. Dan stood in a euphoric trance, feeling pain, but he looked around, wondering how his hand separated from his arm. In the distance, Chris heard of the whirling sound, and a white streak passed through Dan. His brother's head split down the middle, shaped like a Y. Chris saw the white streak head toward the tree line. He thought that the events couldn't get any weirder, but it wouldn't stop there. A gargantuan figure stepped from the tree line and caught the white streak like a metal to a magnet. The object stopped glowing, and the figure placed it on a belt with other knives and blades hanging from it. It stood at 8 feet tall, pointy ears emerged from its knotted mane, and hair draped from its arms and legs. A triangular chrome plate covered in dents and scratches protected its torso, and smaller plates covered its upper arms and thighs. Trent knelt on the ground staring into the ditch, oblivious to the commotion around him. But when Dan's body flopped next to him, his awareness level peaked. He scrambled on the ground, pulling his tied hands under his legs and to his feet. Trent pried Dan's Beretta from his severed hand. Chris aimed his gun and shot at the beast. 2 sparks flashed from its chest plate, and it reached over his shoulder and pulled out what appeared to be like a spear. Without any words spoken, they ran as fast as they could. Neither of them looked back, and from behind them came that piercing howl. Chris veered left, forgetting about Trent. He hopped over fallen logs, ducked under low tree branches, and with each step a new command popped into his head. Run, escape, flee. Through the columns of passing trees, he saw Trent running. He heard a zooming sound like a speeding race car, and he saw the spear soar in Trent's direction. The thought, good riddance, competed with his bewilderment, and somehow disappointment found its way into the mix. He craved the satisfaction of putting a bullet into his head, and he faced the reality that Trent may die at the hands of some predator, or he himself may die and Trent will survive. A rhythmic gallop switched him back to survival mode. He felt thumping in the ground below him, and he heard deep huffing. He heard leaves rustling, branches snapping. That buzzing sound echoed through the trees, and that flash followed. The flash this time was more of a strobe light. Cracking and clanging blasted around him, and before him, one by one, the trees tilted. Chris veered again, but the trees in that direction began falling as well. He felt the urge to stop, but he suppressed it. He slowed down, not wanting to be squashed. Survival mode kicked up another gear, and he forged ahead. He figured he'd dodge falling trees or hop over ones that already fell. Chris Kane ran faster than he did in years. It reminded him of a party raid of his high school girlfriend Trisha's house. Sirens wailed, and lights blinked, and although much of the night was a drunken blur, he remembered jumping out of her second-story bedroom window and landing on his feet like it was just a flight of stairs. Crisis made the legs pump faster. Two falling trees like a couple of crossing swords tilted before him. He thought he could make it. No, he knew he could make it. But the closer he got, the more it looked like he'd run right into the falling trees. Crashing boomed around him, but he didn't hear galloping or grunting. He knew better than to think it gave up on him. He knew whatever it was, it had a plan. Too late, the trees cut his path and another one fell behind him. A fourth one fell on top of the other two, and Chris found himself in some tree trunk coffin. Sandwiched under the trees, Chris attempted to roll over, but his shoulder bumped into a thick branch. The moon peered down at him through the crisscrossing tree branches. He envisioned that chubby-cheeked moon smile, and it laughed at him. "Look what you got yourself into," it joked. He attempted the one-finger salute, but he could only move his arms a couple inches from his side. A heavy squishing in the dirt got closer and interrupted his train of thought. A pointy ear brushed the moon, and a hairy foot stomped into the ground so close he noticed the indent of its ankle. Chris stiffened like the branches around him, and he took shallow breaths, feeling that the beast might detect any sound he made. It snorted above him, and he closed his eyes tight enough that it strained his facial muscles. The snorting stopped, and the only sounds Chris heard were the orchestra of background crickets and the rapid thumping of his own heart. Again, he knew it wasn't gone, and he knew, like any hunter, it waited for its prey to drop its guard. A thunderous soar surged through the trees, and a massive weight bent the tree trunks so hard that it sounded like crunching bones. Three rigid tendrils like tarantula legs wrapped around the tree branch. He lowered his head and closed his eyes again. His heart was an engine piston in his chest, and he felt tears build up behind his eyelids. He recalled being over his dad's knee about to get the belt. Its growl bellowed again, and the lid of the tree trunk coffin flew off. He felt the shock one had when the shower curtain thrashed open. He lay there, shaking, eyes closed because he couldn't bring himself to make eye contact with that thing. Tears trickled down his cheeks and neck, and he knew how roaches fell under a lowering boot heel. Moments passed, and he opened his eyes after hearing nothing. He sat up and saw the beast tearing through trees, heading in the other direction. He jolted up and, surveying his surroundings, he knew he had to act fast. He ducked down, rifling through trees, feeling leaves and branches slap him back in the face, but he didn't care. He needed to get away from that thing. He ran as fast as his legs could take him, and the moon buried itself in the overhead trees. He ran an infinite path, and he lost sense of direction. A white jagged triangle surfaced in the distance, and he knew he found a clearance, maybe even a road. As he got closer, he saw trees and the white haze of moonlight. He rushed into an open space and halted when he saw 4 sets of ringlets, sharp teeth, dirty white fur, and pointy ears. The other 3 wolves growled, reacting to Chris's presence, and he saw Trent's back to him. To be continued. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so usually I read from my dime novel. I actually have my dime novel for sale over there on the table. I also have some business cards over there. I have my new website, therighttom.com, L. Garvey Thomas on Facebook, LGThomas0813 on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. L. Garvey Thomas, give him the round of applause. Woo! Thanks for sharing. New trio, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, new source.